Skip Phillips is the owner of Pi Tape Texas LLC, a company based in Tyler that was first started in California in 1944 by his grandfather. But more than that, Skip Phillips was the designer and architect of award-winning pools around the globe. In this episode, we discuss his grandfather's invention, how he went from working on the factory floor to becoming the most influential pool designer of his time, and buying back his family business. Please join me as we go and meet Skip Phillips. But first, if you enjoy the stories on this channel and you want to help them to reach more people, please like and subscribe. Alright, so today I'm interviewing Skip Phillips. He's owner of Pi Tapes in Tyler, Texas. I'll let him kind of introduce himself and then we'll go from there.
Sure. As you said, it's my name's Skip Phillips. We relocated fairly recently from California, moved the company Pi Tape from there to Texas. And for your viewers, we didn't bring any of the garbage from California with us. We're trying to get away from it, but anyway, that company started in 1944 in San Diego, where my grandfather was working for Solar Turbines, and he developed a process that would enable him to get accurate diameter measurements by using the circumference instead of calipers on the exhaust manifolds for the fighter planes. And it was interesting because he had a ninth grade education and taught himself trigonometry and calculus in order to be able to do that. But as that measuring tape progressed, he ended up breaking away from solar and moved it into his garage, actually, in San Diego. And later on, my father, who was a retiring calibration technician for General Dynamics, he marries, Norman Collins was my step-grandfather, I would say, marries his daughter. And so they teamed up on the company, and I started working in that company in the 60s. So we had a kind of a long history with that, and then took a sabbatical and got involved in the pool industry.
Yeah. So your grandfather, like, how well did you know him, really?
Well, I don't know that anybody really knew Norman Collins very well. He wasn't a people person, but really an interesting character. He had an extensive background in history and archaeology. He actually went into Mexico in the 30s and dug up ruins and had artifacts that he had procured. But he was probably technically genius level, but he wasn't a people person.
Yeah, just sort of a silent sort of person.
Yeah. He had a wit to him, but he knew a lot about collecting coins and stamps, and had, this is, quite a while back, and he had guns and ammo. He had a pretty diverse. He played organ almost professionally. He did a lot of interesting things.
Sort of just a jack of all trades kind of guy.
Yeah. And Mary, my step grandmother, just really a sweetheart. Just very, very nice people.
Yeah. So was it just general interest that kind of drove him to educate himself on all this? Like you're saying, he's going on archaeological adventures.
Yeah, I think so. They traveled extensively, and he was very, very smart. And that's really the sad part, I think, about losing some of that generation. The greatest generation is that you don't just lose their drive that enabled them to do incredible things, but all those talents. All the knowledge they accumulated. You lose all that too. But really, really great people.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, kind of the people of that generation. Which my grandfather, which he would have probably been a good deal younger than him, but sort of still that era. I'm trying to think when he would have been really involved in stuff was probably 50s and 60s. But I mean, he's sort of the same way, has very little education, grew up as a child as a squatter and stuff, but he, went in the military and got education there, but also just super self-motivated, self-taught kind of guy. Ended up with like 4 patents and stuff. And I've met people who worked for Bell Helicopter, old guys, same sort of thing where it's this weird, not really weird, but something you don't really see now where it's so much you got to get this education in order to go and do something. It's like they wanted to teach themselves how to go do something like that.
There was a lot of innovation going on at the end of World War II, the Skunk Works and Lockheed, where they kind of broke away from the system and they developed incredible aircraft. And then in the 50s, when my dad was working at Edwards on the booster systems for the Atlas missile, that was the right stuff times. That's when they were working on Gemini and all those things. I remember where we lived in Barstow. The X-15, when they were testing it, would break the windows in Barstow. So, yeah, I'm not certain that there's the work ethic and innovation that made that generation successful. I'm not so sure that it exists right now, or it's not as prevalent, I think, right now.
I wondered. I wonder what that is, because I feel like there's got to still be, and I still do meet people who are very creative, self-motivated, but what it was about that time, whether it's just coming out of the Depression and the hard times out of that, and people just trying to do whatever they could to move forward out of that, but I wonder what that is and if we could kind of capture that again.
Well, I think World War II probably had a lot to do with it because as a community, as a country, there was that common bond where you had a focus, and that's an unfortunate side effect of conflict.
Yeah.
Nobody wants the conflict, but it did create a bonding mechanism where the entire country really was pulling together, and his innovation occurred towards the tail end of that.
Yeah. So let's go back to you. So, you're working for the company in high school and stuff. So where do you go from there? What's the next step for you?
Well, I was working at the tool company, and then my father came to me one day and he says, "Hey, I want you to go clean your grandmother's pool." Now, I had no idea why I would do that. I had no idea what I was doing, but I did. I went down and I found the tools, and I managed to clean the pool without blowing the filter up or anything like that. And then he tells me, he goes, "Well, I bought a service company, pool service company." Mm-hmm. And he goes, "How would you like to work in that?" Which my brother was also probably mechanically genius level. He was blood related to Norman Collins. He actually rebuilt an automatic transmission looking at a manual when he was 13 years old. So the tool company was probably a really good fit for Dean. But for me, the concept that I'd be driving around in a little pickup truck wearing cutoffs and out in the sun was a lot better than being in a temperature-controlled room breathing lacquer thinner. So I thought that was a great idea. And so in '75, I started with that company, and we built it up to 3 retail stores, and we were doing 1,100 pools a week on pool service. So I got a chance to, learn how to run retail stores, learn about the parts, ended up doing repairs. And then I made the decision that I wanted to build pools. And so I told my dad, I want to create my own company. I want to build pools. And he says, "Well, don't you have to know something about that?" I said, "Well, apparently not. Based on what I see out there, there's very little mechanical aptitude. You can actually have a system that fails to meet any known standard, and you claim the design even though you didn't do it, and you can get a design award for that.
Yeah.
And he says, you're not serious. And I said, no, I'm serious. So in California, you have to have a contractor's license, unlike here in Texas, to design or to build pools. So I went to a school because there was no design and construction education. All you did was you tried to go to a school that would teach you how to pass the test. And so I went into the first one and I said, I want to go to the school and take the C53 test. And they said, well, do you have the 4 years experience? Do you have letters of recommendation and all the things that were required? I hadn't thought about that part. And obviously I didn't have any of that. I'd never built a pool. And actually I'd never seen one built. So by the time I exhausted all my options, there was one school left. It was above the post office, smoky room. And I go up to the counter and I said, I want to take the C53 test. And he starts out, well, he got like that far. Do you? And I said, look, I'll get the letters of recommendation. I'll pay you cash and I'll pass first time. He goes, okay, you're in. So I was able to forge and get people to write letters for me. And I did pass the test. And then the next challenge, this is in 1979, the next challenge was to be able to find somebody that would let me build their pool. So I had a semester in high school of drafting, and I came across a family that was interested in having me do the pool. They didn't know how to bid them, so we did it on what's called a cost plus. You take a percentage of the cost of the pool, and bought their kids ice cream at Foster's Freeze. I was doing everything I could to try to close this contract. And so I drew the pool. Everybody did free pool designs at that time. And it had multiple radius points, 3 different elevations. And they said, okay, we want you to build the pool. So the tractor operator shows up. And we had designed it so his access into the yard was into the deep end of the pool, which made it a pretty steep, going to be a pretty steep ramp. Yeah. So they peel all the sod off and they go to lay the pool out. And so he comes over to me and he goes, what did you measure this with, a rubber measuring tape? And I said, why? He goes, well, the pool doesn't fit. And what I had done is I had measured the yard with a wheel. And so there was elevation changes, and so I had gained a few feet going across the yard. But my next problem now is I had to sit down on the fly in their backyard and find 9 different inside and outside radius points and compress them so the pool would fit. Mm. That was an education in itself. So we get the pool laid out, they start digging, and then he hooks up with the power supply for the neighbor's pool, jerks their time clock into the dirt, and he gets a little bit further, and the bottom of the soil, the support for the pool, was like a mattress. It was so soggy, and then the hydraulic hose blew up and painted the entire backside of their house with hydraulic fluid that on the house they had just painted. So I go back to the office, and my dad sees me, and he says, "What's wrong?" I said, you know what? I just want to be done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. I feel like, just bringing the dirt back, resodding the yard, and just being done. And I told him what happened, and he says, well, what's the worst that can happen? And I said, it's happening. The worst is happening right now. And he says, well, how much would it be if everything fails? And I don't know, this was a long time ago, and I think I said $15,000 was my exposure, if I had to tear it out and do it over. And it was the only decent advice actually he ever gave me, and he said, well, Skip, they can't eat you. And so I went ahead, I completed that pool. They probably sold pools for me for 7 or 8 years after that during the ownership time, and my second pool won a design award. So that was my experience. So I learned a lot in the first pool, especially when you had never even seen one built. Not that you hadn't built one, but you'd never seen one built.
So, after that experience, like, what was it that made you go, like, okay, I can keep doing this, even though you're sort of willing to give up on the first one?
Well, the good news is I didn't give up. That was the number one learning experience, is never give up. So that was my takeaway on that. And then we were having quite a bit of success, actually, the more confidence that I got. Mm-hmm. And probably the next life-changing experience was in the mid-'80s. And the images of that project, a lot of my projects are on my website, Skip Phillips LLC. But that particular project, as cool as it was, that wasn't the important part. It was who that I was actually doing the project for, which was Alan Paulson. He owned Gulfstream. And so the rumor was that Alan Paulson had actually gambled that entire company on the premise that he was going to come up with a new design that was requested by a potential owner. So Alan Paulson was already the best in the world at what he did. Everybody could pretty much agree with that. And this is a long time ago, but I think that the criteria was, I think it was Dallas, Dubai, but it had to have a certain speed, a certain range, payload, all of that. Mm. And if you invest in the development of an airplane like that, and then it fails, it could be catastrophic. So he had enormous competition. He had Bombardier in Canada, the Canadair program. He had Embraer in Brazil. I think Lear and Citation are in Kansas. Dassault, the Falcon program, is in France. So he does that. He develops the plane, and it hits, and it reestablishes Gulfstream as being the best in the world at what they did. Well, I had an opportunity to talk to him, and I knew this story because we were involved in aerospace, and we actually sold stuff to Gulfstream. But he lands in this twin-turbine Sikorsky out in the front yard. The American flag was the windsock. It was a beautiful property. Had his own horse racing track. And so I asked him, I said, how do you do that? How do you make the decision to gamble that company on the come? And he says, well, I don't really have a choice. And I said, well, of course you did. You were the best in the world. He goes, yeah, but that's temporary. He says, being the best is always temporary. And some people make the excuse that they don't want to invest in their company or they don't want to move ahead because of economic conditions. But he says, it's been my experience that there's always room for the best. Doesn't matter what the economy is. And my takeaway in that was I came away with a completely different attitude. I wanted to be the very best at what I did. And the good news was there's only three parts of a pool. There's the design, the structure, and the mechanical. So in order to be the best, you had to be the best at all three. So I focused on trying to improve all of those. But once again, there was no educational system to do it, which is what ultimately drove in the late 90s me and two other people creating the Genesis Education Program, which was turned out to be the only third-party ISET-approved educational system in the world for swimming pool design and construction, which gave us a chance to, travel to give schools in Italy and France and Germany. We had 6 years in a row in Germany, Australia, Bali, Canada. So it was quite a run. It was a lot of fun, and I still have a contract with that company. We sold it. I still have a contract to work with them as an ambassador. So
yeah. So what like? Because I'm trying to think of how you go about setting up a design for a pool. So like, what's your thought process? How do you approach that?
Well, before I went to this educational program that I founded, it was intuitive. It just so happened that even though my aptitude leaned more towards the technical, hydraulics and things like that, which is now helpful to me today, obviously, now that I own Pi Tape again. Yeah. But once we took the educational program and we broke it down, and you learned that you have to also educate yourself in the vocabulary of other design professionals. So that would be architects, landscape architects, interior designers. So all of that terminology, rhythm, color, balance, texture, proportion, scale, once you're able to grasp the principles, the design principles, then you can start applying that to your own project. And it's interesting because I began to realize that I actually kind of knew a lot of that stuff going in, but it was more intuitive. But the educational system reinforced it.
Yeah. So the creative side and all that sort of came naturally to you, or was that harder for you than the technical side, would you say?
Well, on these vessels, you've got the structural, the mechanical, and the cosmetic. But the soils report dictates the structural. Mm-hmm. So that's what engineers are for. And even though you may bring an engineer for your first few projects to refine your line velocities and line sizing and pumps and job descriptions and turnover rates and things like that, there was really quite a few hydraulic classes that I could take. But on the cosmetic side, what I did is I never looked at the pool industry because I considered what they were doing was primarily a failure. So I focused on trying to learn what was driving the true design professionals, which would be the architects in particular. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be a few that you don't like their style or something like that, and sometimes that hurdle seems pretty high because you don't have the education. I had a high school education, but then I realized that arguably the three most influential architects in the history of the United States, Thomas Jefferson did the University of Virginia. Mies van der Rohe came to the United States from Germany, taught at Ivy League College, designed the Seagram's building, and then obviously Frank Lloyd Wright. Everybody knows who that is, but there's no evidence that any of the three had an architectural degree. Mm. And I thought, well, I don't have an architectural degree, and if I focus, I can do better than I think what a lot of these people are doing. And so and all the vessels are different. I don't repeat them. There's too many other opportunities to do cool stuff.
Yeah. So you said, like, as far as you were concerned, like what the industry was doing was failing as far as design and everything. Why did you consider to be that way?
Well, it's a lack of drive in the industry itself, and the bar is very, very low. And the pool industry did a good job of promoting their product as it's like a refrigerator. You get the least expensive one. One beside the other. There's really no difference. Nobody was charging for design, but why should they charge? I mean, it wasn't any good. So, but if you don't have the ability to charge for your time and your intellect, then it's a self-defeating cycle. When I did the the project just when we were starting Genesis, and I did the project at our home. So now that pool's 25 years old, I guess. At that point in my career, so this would have been in the late 90s, I had reached the point where I was traveling, actually internationally, getting paid to do designs, and that was unheard of. It's kind of unheard of even today. But there's another side effect of that where you start getting published. You start getting interviewed, and people, magazines and newspapers start recognizing your work. So the Robb Report, which is the Bible of conspicuous consumption, anybody that's ever seen that magazine, in '93 did an article called Club 21. And they picked the people that they thought were the most influential in the world in individual industries. And I really got a great head start on that, because they picked, Alan Paulson for Gulfstream, the best business jets in the world. They picked Ferrari. They picked Cartier. They picked Armani for clothing. And they picked me for pools. And so that was rarefied air,
Yeah.
So now you're starting to get interviewed. You're starting to, HDTV is interested in what you're doing. And I got a call from Better Homes and Gardens. And they said, we want to interview you. We see your vessels look different, but we want to know, we assume the structure of mechanical is good, but we want to see what your philosophy is. Mm-hmm. And so we were going back and forth. They were based in New York, and I was gone a lot. And so finally we settled that instead of me going to New York, she was coming to California. So she walks in the backyard and she says, I've never seen anything like this before. I said, well, I could have saved you a trip. I've got 3 in the Hamptons right by you. You could have taken a look at those. So she takes out her notepad, and when you get interviewed on pools, you can almost pre-write the questions. They always ask you the same things. So the first question she asked me, she says, how often do you use your pool? I said, every day, actually, when I'm home. And she says, it's January. I said, I know that. And she says, what's the temperature of the pool? And I said, 58. And she goes, you go swimming in a 58-degree pool? I said, you didn't ask me if I went swimming. You asked me if I used my pool. And she says, well, what's the difference? I said, well, didn't you say it when you walked in the backyard? Didn't you say you've never seen anything like that before? And the fact is, if I do a design and it doesn't have that kind of impact to where if you never got wet, it was a value to you, then I wasted your money and my time. And it completely changed the trajectory, actually, of the article. And people began to recognize that it's not just the utilitarian value. There's the audible qualities, the reflective qualities, and all those things come into play. So, and I don't see much of that happening in this area, frankly. But that's not just because we're in East Texas. That's actually a global problem. It's not just here. There's a handful of companies that, have taken the time to learn and educate themselves. And these vessels look a lot different than they did when we started Genesis 25 years ago.
Yeah. So I kind of want to go back a little bit because, you've come to this point where, you're being rated as one of the most influential people in the field, or the most, and, you're getting Home and Gardens and everybody. So you mentioned, most of these companies, this is what the cost is. You're not paying anybody for design and stuff. So how do you convince somebody to pay for that design in a field where it's just kind of paint by numbers?
Well, first off, not everybody's your client. Not everybody cares. So I had one of the students ask me, they said, how many of your clients do you get? I said, all of them. And they go, about 100% every time you go out. And I said, no, I didn't say that. I said, I get all of my clients.
Yeah.
I go out on all the leads, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're client. They're my client. So not everybody feels what I feel is important, and that's okay. That we'll still have a nice conversation, and hopefully we'll give them enough information so that they can at least go through whatever process they want to go through and have it be successful. But that's why there's a lot of different cars, and there's a vast range of pricing and detail. So it's not just economic. It's also, maybe it's just not important.
Yeah. So, I guess, so when you're starting out, you said you had to fight to get, one customer, doing your best to really sell it and stuff. So from there, did you advertise yourself, or was it just kind of word of mouth, and the area you lived in sort of helped you grow the company? Or
Well, I was getting a lot of press. There was no reason for me to pay for ads. It was done for me. I watched one of the HGTV programs, and 3 of the 10 top pools were mine. So when you're getting that kind of profile, I've had projects from Portugal to Singapore, and so we got a chance to do some really unique stuff. And once again, that built on that stuff. And often the people in this industry would come to me, and we would work. They would hire me to do their designs. I had a work permit in Canada for 6 years.
Yeah. I guess this wasn't so much a question for once, you're being shown on television and magazines. It's more of back in, I think you said 79, when you build this first pool. In an industry where it was all kind of just cookie cutter, was it just word of mouth from that pool that kind of led you to getting other jobs? Or
Well, I had a benefit. I had 3 stores too. So people were coming into the stores. I had plaques all over the walls showing my work. So I could actually mark off disenfranchised pool owners, and they would say, gee, I wish Skip would have done my pool. Or they'll tell their friends, hey, this guy has a store. You can go in and talk to him. So I did leverage what I had, for sure. But also keep in mind, it's like my friend in Canada, when we first started working together, he says, we had 5 projects, and one of the projects was getting close to being done. And he says, how long does it take when we work together for us to be able, I want to have the kind of impact that your portfolio has. How long does that take? How many projects does it take? I said, 1. He goes, 1. I said, yeah, the one that we're finishing up right now, if you photograph that well, and you focus on the details that really resonate with your type of client and my type of client, it just takes 1. So I could literally take my portfolio, but at that time it'd take me 30 years or something like that to develop. I said I could throw it away and I could start all over with these 5, and I'd do just fine.
Yeah. So you said, each one you do was different. And that sort of helped you, stay interested, keep innovating and stuff. So, how did you approach something to change it up from the last one, make it more interesting for you to do?
Well, it's interesting because some of the details that I see are so prevalent right now and really badly done, like fire bowls.
Yeah.
The first time that I did fire bowls was in La Jolla, and it was in, I think, the mid-90s. So that's getting close to 30 years ago. And it was a remodel, and I did what's called a rainfall, which has great audible qualities. And I actually decided, I'm going to put the bowls in the water. Now, nobody had ever done that before, as far as I knew. And so I moved these fire bowls in the water, and I thought that we were missing a metal element. And so I created this this big arcing flat bar of stainless steel as a handrail going into the pool. And then I'd also experimented with a it's very common for people to raise the wall of their pool on one side for the excuse of squirting water back in. But I decided to do that in more of a pyramid or a battered wall. Mm-hmm. And so I was experimenting with these things, and I didn't know anybody had done them. I had never seen it anyplace else. But there's just so many different things that you can do. This 90-degree coping detail, floating coping, where you're driving the water right up underneath the coping. I thought I was the one that had come up with it, and then I ended up getting this book called Hollywood Poolside. And it had all of these cool vessels from the 20s and 30s primarily, by the silent film stars. They were the ones that had the money to have pools when nobody else had pools.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I'm looking in there, and there's Wallace Reed, 1920s movie star, and his pool has my 90-degree coping detail. and then Clara Bow sitting by her pool, and she had the floating.
You said, how did he steal that?
It was really. But you know what? They say there's no really new ideas, but the thing is, I didn't steal them from anybody. I didn't even know they existed, and it was things that I was trying to do to innovate because I thought they were cool. So one of the interviews was, what do you like about pools? What's your simplest motivation? I said, I like the elevation's low and the water level's high. That's it.
So, you go from, building pools and everything, you buy back the company, and you move it out here. What's the decision process with that?
Well, my dad passes away. My stepmom remarries 10 months later. This is in the late 90s, and I was, doing fine on my own, doing pools, and so then she passes away, and I find out she's disinherited the whole family, her grandchildren, and given everything to this guy she just married. And it's a pretty sordid tale. It sounds like something out of Peyton Place, that she this guy actually removed my father from his own grave in order he would not be buried next to my stepmom anymore. Moved him. I don't even know what would possess somebody to think that was a good idea.
I was also like, I don't know how you get about doing that.
It was insanity, but he had control of the company, and I heard about that, and within the first 30 days after she passed away, and I said, this isn't okay, So I made the decision to pursue recovering the family trust, not on my behalf, but for my daughters. I have 4 daughters. And we basically won an unwinnable case because we overturned a legitimate trust with an oral contract, which is unheard of. But this guy was so repulsive and the things he had done were so outrageous that I think that made the judge realize that, that this family had never intended this to go like that. Mm-hmm. So we recovered it. It was placed in a trust. The state of California had a fiduciary that was managing it. Well, that was a bad idea. It turns out she was stealing from my kids. She ended up going to prison. And then the next character that they brought in, they just about run it into the ground at that point. And so they said, we're going to dump the company. And this is like in 2006 or something like that, just before the crash, Mm-hmm. And I was furious, because I got together with Carrie, my wife, and I said, gosh, we put our home on the line. We did everything to try to recover this, and it's going down the tank, and there isn't anything we can do about it. And they're going to sell it. And I said, maybe we should buy it. And she goes, well, maybe we should. I said, you know what? I was just spouting off. I didn't think that all the way through. She goes, well, why don't you think it all the way through? I said, okay, well, we'd have to put our home on the block again because we don't have the money to buy it. We'll have to be the high bidder because we're a member of the family. If it fails, it's within 2 weeks of not making payroll. If it fails, which is possible, we'll lose our home, but we'll lose it to the kids. They're going to get our house someday anyway, so maybe there's no risk. Mm-hmm. So we did. We actually were able to get the loans. We bought it, and I think it was a God thing because what a blessing. It just took off after that. And we weren't involved for quite a while because we were busy raising our girls. But the more we got involved in it, we saw some opportunities to really take that Alan Paulson approach. What would make this the best in the world? Because the product, there's almost nobody in the world that makes it. Mm-hmm. So we got our ISO 17025 ILAC, the calibration lab status, completely revamped the calibration room, ISO 9001, the management system. So our clients like Boeing and Pratt & Whitney and GE, and if it's something that's round and spins fast, they typically...
They want that spec.
Well, they have our they'll use our product, but half of the business is international, half of it's domestic. And we had a fire, 14 months ago, completely gutted the building. So I thought we were done. I thought everything was going our way, and then 5 hours later, we're done. And I told Carrie, I said, well, we need three things. Our insurance company that we'd only had for 2 weeks. I said, the insurance has to go through our team. You don't go shopping for Pi Tape employees. You have to create them because nobody in the world is making what you make. And we need God on our side. And that's what happened. So now we got the building just the way we want it. We've got all new equipment, and we're right on the final throes of doing the final details on that, and it's really turned out great.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the new building. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it is great, and we were able to do it just the way we would have wanted to had we been able to start over. But that wasn't possible at that time, and then we had no choice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So I think I'm out of intelligent questions, so if there's anything you'd like to end this with,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I just feel blessed to be in East Texas. Our family, my daughters now are older. They've got children. My son-in-laws work with me there. We have a great group of people. Everybody here has been really friendly and helpful, and so we're in the buckle of the Bible Belt, which is the way we like it, and my girls kind of missed the beach because we lived in San Diego, so we were close to the beach, but we've been able to get some property in Florida on the Gulf Coast, and so they can go to the beach. They're just not going to California.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the interview. It's been great.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, hi. You actually made it to the end. Not many people do that. I guess you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and like and subscribe. Share it with people if you want to. And just tune in next time because I'm always interviewing different people. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.